Airline to visit the land of Fiji. Pula Vinaka, Vinaka Nakare. Masese, masese, masese. Masa esa masese. Tabaco, tabaco, tabaco. Tabaca, oh tabaco. Yankona, yankona, yankona. Yanga, ona, yankona. Absarara, warara, koya. Rara, koya. Rara, koya. Bosarara, warara. Rara, koya. Imaseni kabatu. Ladies and gentlemen, now we're gonna move from Fiji to the Polynesian airline and on our way to the land of Samoa. Ciao, Falala, to you all. Pinoy, 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 Barcelona. I'm Siva, wala, oi, oi. Hello, Fata, pepe, wala, oi. So it is so many bears to point. Ha, 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 te anonata. And my toe to a low officer. Sube I so fa amale malela. So we are the alpha ala. Awe, bata lupe lupe. Awe, tani tani awe. Hello, loto leva. So we no fa apel. So we no fa apele pele. Minoi, minoi, yeah. Minoi, minoi, yeah. Minoi, minoi, tele. Minoi, mai ala pele. Awele pululole, ela mole mole. Ala mula mua peyo se lole. Pani ailo amale ise kope. Awele sele unu sele mole. Awe, bata lupe lupe. Awe, tani tani awe. Hello, loto leva. Sawina pa apel. Sawina pa apel pele. Minoi, minoi, yeah. Minoi, minoi, yeah. Minoi, minoi, tele. Minoi, mai alam pele. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, now we're gonna move from the land of Samoa to the land of Tahiti and Rarotonga. Yorana and Yorana. Peace. Yorana, Yorana, Yorana. Tevaine Tahiti. Awe, awe, ne, awe vaine Tahiti. Tiale, tiale, tiale. Forte. Awe, awe, de noa, noa. Que tiale forte. Oh, careti awe. Y fora, nuye. Ah, de noa, nae. Chaue, wabo, chaulie. Oh, careti awe. Y fora, nuye. Ah, de noa, nae. However, puta, ladies and gentlemen, this is the pilot. We're gonna learn in a few minutes. Whoa, to the kingdom of Tonga. Malo Elele, and welcome to the kingdom of Tonga. Otoma kwe otuanga ofa. We see where the speak Tonga. Mate ali kusikifeima. Que hiki otafolua kotoma. Ayange mu ata ulunganga. Que tuha mohota kala patafonua. Que la calle kafola ebe eba. Que tonga pe atoma. Tonga pe okufefe. Te baluka te bademaite. Que fai baka
Lutu na kapi kamani si royani bara
Siva mai taimi Samoa. Kala lua a ave mai nei, tama
Folau Maria ho eki pea malo lele e tonga kotoa pe o kui he Vake Tali Folau le tio tonga kai o mahafo ke tau le tio ko ya VTF Pacifica. Welcome all to our program today, sponsored by so-called Pacific Island COVID-19 team. A Pacific Islander COVID-19 response team. Now I got it. Thank you for sponsoring this 1 hour program so we can talk with Kenny Lastani. Kenny, welcome. And
Thanks for having me.
I'll leave you two for the program, and if I'll have any questions, then I'll come in. Is that okay, Alice?
Sure, but you're welcome to stay, Emily.
Yeah, but I'll be...
Okay. Okay, hi Kenny. Teu tonga kore peke hufanga te whakatapu kua o si hano tuku atu me he re teo me polokalama re teo tonga. Te kai tuku mai pe whainga maari e koe ni ke whaiha talatala noa. I feel honored that Kenny is taking some time of his busy schedule ke kao mai ki he our conversation about COVID-19 and about tuat pe mo famalo kia Emily Mosione mo e le tio tonga he mawhainga maari ke whai atu ha popo ka inga mo ha he ilo na aonga e ngā wiki o tau ka inga tonga no matter where you're from. So thank you for the opportunity. I hope it's okay that Kenny and I just speak in English.
Yes, please, Alice. Yeah, this is for our Pacific Islander as a whole, including us Tongans.
Okay, sounds good. I'm just gonna introduce Kenny, and then I'll go ahead and give Kenny an opportunity to talk about some of the work that he has been doing around COVID-19 since last year, and then Kenny just recently published a paper on hepatitis B, and I would love to hear more about that work. And I'm just really excited to have an opportunity to talk to Kenny. I'm a huge fan of his. And so Kenny Lastani is a fourth year Tongan medical student at the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine. He is interested in liver disease in Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities and plans to pursue a residency in internal medicine, followed by a fellowship in hepatology. He is the president of Pacificas in Medicine, a national group of Pacific Islander medical students that strives to increase NHPI representation in the medical field. He recently worked as a community education specialist and clinical research coordinator at UC San Diego's Antiviral Research Center as part of the COVID-19 Prevention Network to help conduct the Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca clinical trials at UC San Diego. Welcome, Kenny. I want to give you a chance to say hello to everybody, and then we'll just go from there.
Yeah, hi, everyone. Thanks again, Alice, for inviting me to be here. I'm always excited to come and talk about the work that I'm involved in, especially because it's important for our communities to hear, and especially better when it's coming from one of our own. So thanks again for having me, and nice to catch up with you as well. It's been a long time since I've been able
I know. We're around each other in email and in work, but we never have a chance to spend time to talk with each other. I had the privilege of meeting Kenny when he was an undergrad at UCLA way back when. Oh my gosh, that feels like so long ago. And when Kenny was at UCLA, he was really involved with the Pacific Island Student Association there, PISA, and also helped to start an organization there for Pacific Islanders who were interested in going into health careers, which is really, really amazing. It's an area of work where we need more young professionals, especially when we know the health status in our community. So that's why I say I'm a big fan of Kenny's, because I have been watching his trajectory. And at one point I wanted to go to medical school. And so Kenny and I would talk about those dreams, and just to watch him in medical school, in his fourth year, really looking ahead at his future. It's just really exciting to know how successful our younger generation is. So Kenny, I'm just going to ask you if you can share a little bit about your background, maybe your upbringing, where your parents are from and where you grew up, and a little bit of like your early education.
Yeah, for sure. So currently I'm a fourth year medical student at UC San Diego School of Medicine. This past year, I was able to take some time off to do some research, which is something that a lot of people don't really know about when you're in medical school. They think that it's kind of just, straight through, but there's a lot of flexibility and availability for you to pursue some of your interests. But I was born in Auckland, New Zealand. And when I was 3 years old, my parents decided to move to the United States, just like everyone else, for better opportunities for work and education. My dad is from Vava'u, my mom is from Kanakupolu. And I've only had the opportunity, I think, once in my lifetime to go back and visit my mom's island sometime when I was an undergrad at UCLA. And I just wish that my parents had taught me Tongan a little bit more growing up, because it's definitely been a barrier for me. I definitely, a lot of the work and a lot of the passion of why I want to pursue medicine is to uplift my community and heal my community. And language, I think, is going to be one of the challenges to get there. So maybe sometime this year, since I have some blocks for research, I'll take a trip to Tonga if they'll let me in, if they'll open the borders for me to learn the language a little bit better. But so my parents came to the United States. We moved to Utah and then to California, where I went to high school in Orange County at Loera. And then, like you mentioned, I went to UCLA for undergrad and majored in molecular cell and developmental biology. And to be honest, I wasn't really raised like in our culture growing up. I grew up going to a Palangi ward in the LDS church. And so I think when I first started at UCLA, I was a little hesitant to start becoming involved in the Pacific Islander Student Association. But I'm so glad and grateful for them for, being open and welcoming me in and teaching me the importance of the work that we do. That's where I crossed paths with you. And it's funny you say you're a big fan of mine, because I've always been a big fan of yours since I met you. And you gave the lecture in Dr. Tanja Siri's class about the health disparities in our community. And I think that was really the first time that I would say enlightened, really, for why I really truly wanted to pursue medicine. It was because, there was a lot of things being overlooked for our people, and I wanted to do something about it. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Emily, feel free to jump in if you have any questions.
Sure.
Throughout. So thank you so much, Kenny, for sharing that. I know that your sentiment about learning the culture and knowing the language is something that a lot of our younger people that are born and raised here always express. So I'm sure that you will find opportunities to do that. I know that there have been people of your generation that have taken time and gone to Tonga, I know a couple of people who were doing their PhDs who went back to spend time in Tonga, and it has been really life-changing for them. So I wish that for you. Maybe the med school will pay for it.
And maybe for the beginning, they can pay you to come as a translator until I learn the language.
I don't know how much better I would be doing that. So I know that I want to hear your thoughts about what you've been seeing with COVID. I know that your work around COVID has been at a different level. I know many of the folks that we're working with are in community organizations, but you did your work at a slightly different level. But I want to actually get your personal perspective on what you've seen with regards to our Tongan population specifically. I don't know how big the Tongan community is in San Diego, but if you can just talk a little bit about what you've seen around COVID, even if you take it back to last year, maybe compare it to what you're seeing now, especially with the Delta variant surging again.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I mentioned, I took some time off last year to do some COVID-19 work and also do some hepatitis B research and publish the manuscript that I'll talk about in a little bit. But I initially started off as a community education specialist for UCSD. They recognize the importance of partnering with people from community-based organizations and the leadership in order to engage, the diverse communities that we have here in San Diego, including Pacific Islanders. And so they had me come on board to help. At the time when I was brought on, it was when clinical trials for the COVID-19 vaccine were kind of like the hot topic. It was around November last year. And, historically, the enrollment for, people of color, including Pacific Islanders, in clinical trials has always been low. And so they were hoping by bringing me on and help having me give some presentations and talks on the COVID-19 vaccine clinical trials and just the process of making the vaccine and stuff would help dissipate some of the misinformation and get our communities more involved in clinical trials. But it was an opportunity, I think, early on to engage our communities, specifically targeting vaccine hesitancy, so that once a vaccine did become available, they would be more open and accepting to taking it. Because, I think historically we've seen for people of color, there's a little bit of hesitation because of the mistreatment and discrimination by research institutions and by the healthcare field. And so, one of the things that I was really interested in starting with UCSD was trying to get people engaged in clinical trials. But I think one of the biggest obstacles that I encountered was the data. It's the same story over and over again. The data wasn't disaggregated. So specifically for people who are registering for COVID-19 vaccine clinical trials. And the reason why that was an issue for me specifically was because they brought me on to kind of give these presentations to encourage Pacific Islanders to enroll, but I couldn't even really see the fruits of my labor, the impact that was having, because it was just Asians or Pacific Islanders kind of aggregated together. And so later on down the line, and more currently, one of the things that I'm looking at is we have the final numbers for enrollment, specifically at UC San Diego for the Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca clinical trials. And I wanted to look specifically to see if the data aggregation and the pre-registration impacted the enrollment of Pacific Islanders ultimately in either of those trials.
And both of them collected the data at the collection end as API.
And that's what was really interesting to me, and a little disappointing, if I'm being quite honest, is that the Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca clinical trials collected disaggregated data.
Oh, they just reported.
Yeah, exactly. So we have that information for enrollment, but when it came to registration, which was being done through the COVID Prevention Network, which is through the NIH, the only categories that they had through their website, which is where we were pulling people from, was, Black, Hispanic, Latino, white, Asian, or Pacific Islander. So unfortunately, that was kind of one of the issues that I was trying to work on. And I think more than anything, just kind of raising the red flag and bringing up this issue to the people I was working with. At least they're more aware of it now, and moving forward, they'll be more cognizant of reporting the data, collecting and reporting data in a disaggregated way. Right.
So that's the irony, is that the companies, the pharmaceutical companies, were collecting the data disaggregated, but the government agency, who is supposed to, there's a mandate at the federal level to collect data that is disaggregated, we're still not doing that.
Exactly. And we even reached out to them via email, the data team that we had here at UCSD. They were really supportive and helpful. They reached out to the COVID Prevention Network and asked them, why this was the case. And they kind of gave not a really satisfactory answer. They just said that they were between two options, to either go with the disaggregated or the aggregated. But ultimately, for statistical reasons and things that were probably above my head, they decided to go with aggregating Asians or Pacific Islanders, which was really, really disappointing. Right. And I'm not surprised to see. And one of the things that I was interested in was was the lack of engagement early on in COVID-19 vaccine clinical trials. Does that then impact vaccine uptake in our communities?
Right.
Because like I was saying, this was an opportunity to really, utilize our resources towards this high risk community. And because the data was aggregated and we couldn't really see if these communities were pre-registering and whether more resources need to be directed that way for education purposes to address vaccine hesitancy, it was kind of a disappointment.
Wow. Yes, I just want to explain why, the work that Kenny was doing is really important to us. And then I'm going to ask Kenny in a little bit to explain what clinical trials are and why they matter. But basically, if we're not able to see how many Pacific Islanders are able to register to be part of these clinical trials, then we have no idea, based on the data that they gather on like the effectiveness of the vaccine, whether our community was part of proving the effectiveness and the efficacy of the vaccine, right? Mm-hmm. People can talk about it in general, but if we're able to say, well, this many Pacific Islanders or this percent of the people that were part of the clinical trials were Pacific Islanders, then we would have more confidence in maybe taking up the vaccine, because we know that our people are also part of the tests, right? Yeah. Can you talk about what clinical trials are and like why this matters?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think just one of the other points that I'll make is, what we're seeing, for example, in another health outcome is for cancer mortality. Although for all the major organ systems, it's mortality from cancer is declining. For people of color, those communities, cancer mortality risks are increasing. And what we see is that engagement in the clinical trials for cancer treatments are really, really low. So, so that's when I saw that was one of the things that supported, the reason why I wanted to investigate whether engagement in COVID-19 vaccine clinical trials would lead to, poor health outcomes for our communities, which is what we're seeing. Right. But for the clinical trials, the pandemic is really impacted a lot of us, but one of the things that I'm kind of grateful for is it was an opportunity for all of us to get a look into how medications, vaccines, and different forms of treatment are produced in the medical field, even down to like aspirin or Tylenol, things that you take on a daily basis that don't even think of. Those things all had to go through a rigorous process through clinical trials to assess safety and efficacy before it was available for the public. And so, for just generally speaking, there's 3 different phases in clinical trials. There's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And in each of these trials, they recruit, a larger group of people. So they start off with like just hundreds of people in the first phase and specifically just look at if it's safe. And then in the second phase, they recruit up to thousands of people and start to look at, if there's an immune response specifically for the COVID vaccine. And in the third phase, they enroll hundreds of thousands of people or tens of thousands of people to look at whether or not it's doing the job at preventing infections, for example, for the COVID-19 vaccine. And so I think what was so unique during this time was the clinical trials were really expedited, and which is, I think, a lot of where the hesitancy for the vaccines came from. Right. People were thinking that, hey, wait a minute, like this is going way too fast. Like
they thought it was Fratamulu.
Normally it takes up to like 8 to 15 years for clinical trials to kind of happen and for the final product to finally be approved. But the goal for the vaccines and other forms of COVID-19 treatment was to happen between 12 to 18 months. And so, understandably, there was a lot of concern about the rapid production and the rapid process. But, one of the things that I've learned through my role as a community education specialist when I was working last year was to just enforce that no steps were skipped. Some steps may have been happening simultaneously, but because it was such an important thing to address, during the pandemic, it was really deadly, and finding a vaccine was important. A lot of resources were dedicated to it, and a lot of time and energy as well.
can you talk a little bit about like what is a clinical trial? I know that you mentioned like, a lot of things down to Tylenol and aspirin go through clinical trials, but I think, a lot of our folks don't really know like what is that?
Yeah, no. So clinical trials, the best way that I could put it is a safe and protocolized way. It's kind of like an experiment, and I don't want to. I hate to use that word because it sounds like we're just being tested like like lab rats or lab mice, but it's a lot more controlled. And so that's the only way we can figure out if something is safe for humans or if it actually works at doing the job that it's supposed to do, is to test it on humans, right? And so that's why clinical trials are important. And they take it very slowly. They make sure that there's no severe adverse events or reactions, that no death is caused by this product early on in the clinical trials. Because if there are severe reactions and if it causes death, then the product will no longer continue and it won't become available for people, to the public. Exactly. So I guess that an experiment is the best way that I could put it for people to understand. But there's a lot of safety protocol in place, and there's like an independent safety board that oversees this, that's not related to the clinical trials, to make sure that people aren't just skipping steps and trying to get away with like death and severe reactions happening during their clinical trial just so that they can get their product out.
Right. And so historically, which is where your role came into the project you were working on, historically, people of color don't participate, or they don't get the information, they don't know how to access. And so generally, our populations don't participate in clinical trials. And I know you probably touched on this earlier, but why is it important that our population, I'll say Pacific Islanders, why is it important that we participate in clinical trials? Yeah,
I think the most important reason for our people to participate in clinical trials is so that the final results and the final data that they and the conclusions of the clinical trials are generalizable to our communities. And they can officially say that this COVID-19 vaccine is safe and it works for the Pacific Islander community because we participated in it. There are some other examples that escape my mind now, where it was predominantly white people who were involved in these clinical trials. And so when, whatever product was produced out of that clinical trial is applied to other communities, the results are skewed and doesn't really produce the result that we want. And I think for a lot of our people, I don't think it's a matter of just being, not wanting to participate in clinical trials. I really think it's just a barrier of knowledge and not understanding the process of why it's important. Because it's not just for yourself. I like to look at it as like you're doing it for the greater good, and some of the biggest values for our people is for community and our families, and so I like to look at it that way as well, as like you're participating to come up with a product that'll protect all of us.
Yeah, I think that if there was a clinical trial for a gout medication, then we would have a lot of Pacific Islanders participate in that clinical trial.
Well, listen, I don't know. There probably is some gout trials going on. Sometimes I'll log on to clinicaltrials.gov just to see what's going on and to see if I can enroll in anything, but who knows? Maybe there is.
Yeah. So if you see a gout clinical trial, please let us know. I'm sure that
diabetics.
We would like to, right, Emily?
And diabetics.
And diabetes. I'm sure that there are a lot of diabetes medication clinical trials that are usually ongoing.
Absolutely. They're always trying to come up with new medications that help, control your sugars better and help protect your kidneys and protect your heart. So there's always clinical trials going on for the betterment of treatment.
So we'll just need to get the information out somehow.
Exactly.
I know that the fact that Pfizer is available to those that are 12 years and older, and the other two are only available for 18 and over, is because Pfizer actually had clinical trials that included kids of that age, right?
Exactly. So same idea, you know, for age groups, you have to be able to do a clinical trial and show that this vaccine is safe for this age group and works for this age group for you to say that this age group can take this vaccine. If it's not tested on them and goes through this clinical trial process, then you can't say that it's not safe and it's not going to work for them.
Right. So yeah, that's one question that I know, and I've been doing doing some COVID-19 basic training for communities. That's one question that comes up is, why is Pfizer available for 12 and up, but the other ones aren't? And, you know, I talk about the fact that Pfizer actually did clinical trials with that age group. And so they know that it's safe for them.
Exactly.
So, okay. Emily, I don't know if you have any questions you want to ask Kenny.
Yeah, thank you, Kenny, for that information. I just wonder whether why, I don't know, how would I word this? Why are we not engaging on those clinical trials? If it's lack of awareness, like what Alice was saying, maybe even myself, I don't even understand. Now I understand the importance of engaging, of participating in clinical trials, but I don't know where to get the information from. You know, you just mentioned the website. Do you think, Kenny, that we need more awareness programs with those kind of information?
Yeah, no, I definitely think that we do. And more importantly, I think that, you know, the government needs to engage with community-based organizations and leadership, provide them the resources and funding that they need to do their work, because ultimately, and data and research has shown that, you know, when community-based organizations or people like us are doing research within our own communities, that people are more engaged. And they're willing to participate because we understand, you know, we can speak our own language, so that eliminates that barrier. Well, I don't, but I will one day, I promise. And also we just understand the cultural barriers and the cultural dynamics as well. So, you know, when we enter a space and we're able, and because when you're coming to a community and trying to teach them about something that's completely, you know, out of their daily life and something that they don't think about, there's already some disconnect and some distance. And so by being able to bring your own people to bring that education, it closes that gap. And so I think the big takeaway that I've seen is just give the money and the resources to community-based organizations so that they can continue to do the work that they're doing.
Right. So they will add on a lot of work for you, Alice.
I'm trying to recruit more people. So No, we have actually what the pandemic has done. We have a little bit more money, you know. So what Kenny's saying, a lot more county agencies, state agencies are paying more attention because Pacific Islanders had the worst case rate and the worst death rates, both at the national levels at many of our different states, but also locally. When you look at county data, our communities had the highest case and death rates when you consider population size. So because we were able to get that data that's disaggregated, we were able to go to California Department of Public Health and say, you need to invest in our community if you're talking about, promoting health equity. Right. As an agency. So we've been able to get a little bit more money. And so we actually have a lot more younger people that are part of the work. So I'm working on it, Emily. I think we need to just make this work glamorous, make it look more glamorous than it is right now. Yeah,
because right now we have a very good reason why we need to participate. Because with our experience too with the COVID-19 and the census, we started off last year. The government starting to see, but still there's a lot of work that the government can see, but maybe our community don't see that, and we need, you know what I mean?
It's our community. This kind of work, I think, it's not that cool.
No, no, I
Yeah.
don't think so.
I think that's changing though. I see a lot more people, students engaged in like the Pacific Island Student Associations, and I think that's a really good indicator that you're going to get more of our youth involved in this type of work, so that at least he can retire.
So I can go have a life.
Yeah.
So
I
the
think,
Pacific Island Student Association is based in UCLA.
Yeah. So when I was at UCLA for my bachelor's, I was involved in the group there. There's also a group down here in San Diego for the undergraduate campus, as well, that I was part of.
A lot of our colleges have Pacific Island Student Associations. So, so that's something that's different. I know when I was in college, that was kind of when that movement started for community groups to start forming clubs and student associations, and it's even way stronger now. Yeah. There's a club at every campus, it seems, and the students are really engaged. They're actually helping with a lot of our research efforts, so that's been really great.
Oh, yeah. Good. Thank you.
Maybe to wrap up the COVID-19 stuff, one of the other points that I wanted to bring up, since we were talking about like the death rates and case rates, so it's the same thing here in San Diego. And I was taking a look at the data just from 2 days ago, so the most recent data that they have. And one of the things that I thought was kind of interesting was we still have the highest rates of COVID-19 infection, unfortunately, but we also have the highest rates of vaccination, which doesn't quite fit the picture. And, they have here, so I'm looking at the numbers, and they have like the 12 years and older population here in San Diego for NHPIs is like 12,400. And then the total number of vaccinated people that they have is 13,400. There's an additional 1,000 people who like, it doesn't
Where
quite.
did they come? Yeah,
exactly.
We're seeing the same numbers, the same discrepancies in the data in LA County. And so I'm in conversation, well, not I, but we're in conversation with them about how they're counting their numbers and whether the extra numbers are other people that are not Pacific Islander that are identifying themselves as Pacific Islander on the data collection end. So that's why it's been hard for us to report vaccination rates, is because it has been a few of our counties are showing above 100% vaccination rate, which is impossible. That's not true. We're like, I know plenty of people who are not vaccinated.
Exactly.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the scary thing, especially because a lot of people are taking this data and running with it and spreading the word and spreading it wide. And so, then when the county hears that, they're like, oh, well, the community don't need any help. They're taken care of. They're fully covered. But one of the things, this is a much smaller scale. When I was doing my data disaggregation work for the clinical trials, is I found that a lot of people who were actually Filipino were identifying as Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander. And so I know that there's a large Filipino community here in San Diego. And I'm wondering if a lot of them are identifying as Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander as well. They're also a large portion of them are part of the health workforce as, nurses and doctors as well. And so, having to be vaccinated when you're in a hospital setting, also will increase those numbers as well, compared to people from our community who are more, involved in, different types of work.
Yeah, exactly. We're seeing, I think you have to look at the data county by county. I know that we saw the same rate in San Bernardino County, like early on. Our response team there ended up talking to the county, and I don't know what they did. I think we should talk to them to see what the county did to adjust whatever they were doing. Right. Because now when I take a look at San Bernardino County's vaccination rate for Pacific Islanders is at like 43%, which seems more realistic for our community. So
because I was attending one of the Zoom meeting with the ethnic media group. And the lady from the state of California was in there, and he said, and she was going, because I was the only Pacific Islander there, and she was saying, let's clap our hands for the Pacific Islanders because they're the one. And I goes, what? Their rate is so high in terms of vaccination. And I goes, I don't think that's true. I mean, and it makes me feel like it discouraged me to ask for funding from the state because they have that data.
Yeah,
anyway,
we actually challenged the state too. We're like, based on what people are telling us, we don't think those numbers are true.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's important as people that are part of the work, and that includes, like Radio Tonga, Emily, and Sione. It's important for us to speak up and challenge it when we feel like that's not accurate. We don't think that's accurate. It's our job as part of this data conversation to point it out when it doesn't match up what we're experiencing in community.
Exactly. And we were partnering, so our San Diego Pacific Islander COVID response team is partnering with UCSD Health and connecting them with like the Sons and Daughters Club of Guam to hold community vaccination events, and the First Samoan Congregational Church of San Diego to hold vaccination events. And then shortly after, like the vaccination numbers came out and the rates, and they were like super high for our community. And I was like, we held a couple events, but I don't think that those two events led to this like skyrocketing rates for our community. And so I think it's unfortunate because when you look at those numbers, people will maybe be less inclined to hold community vaccination events targeted specifically for our communities because it looks like we're already taken care of.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. I think this is a good pause for us to transition. I was gonna start talking about the importance of having, of encouraging people to go into healthcare professionals as a career, because part of addressing health inequities and health disparities for any population, right, that has like specific needs and specific considerations, is to have a workforce that is from that community, because it's one of the approaches to reaching parity. Well, I might as well go there now because I was going to actually segue to your Hep B paper. Let's go to your hepatitis paper, and then if we have time after, we'll talk about it, because I think we kind of have an idea of why it's important for us to encourage our folks to go into healthcare. But yeah, can you tell us about the paper and anything you want to share?
Absolutely. Maybe I can give a little bit of context. First about hepatitis B, which is another virus. So I guess the topic for today is viruses. And so for people who are unaware, hepatitis B is a virus that can cause an infection. And there are two different types of infection. So you can, get an infection, like most adults who get infected by hepatitis B will have like, maybe a fever and feel kind of achy, maybe some symptoms that are similar to COVID actually. But then, after a couple months, it'll resolve. But in some cases, your immune system isn't able to get rid of the virus completely. And so then the virus becomes a chronic infection. And so that's kind of really where the focus is, because chronic hepatitis B, the scary thing is a lot of people don't know they have it, if they have it, because it's going to be a silent disease until it's already caused major issues for your liver. And then that's when you start seeing kind of like the result. You start having symptoms. And at that point, sometimes it's a little too late to reverse the effects of the chronic hepatitis B on your liver. And treatments are available, which is the other sad thing. There are many treatments that are available to help suppress or reduce the viral load of hepatitis B if you have chronic hepatitis, so that you don't have, liver cirrhosis and liver cancer and kind of the other consequences of having that chronic infection. And so one of the reasons why I was specifically interested in looking at hepatitis B in our communities is because I have a family history of hepatitis B, chronic hepatitis B, I should say, also of liver cancer. And unfortunately, I've had one too many aunts and uncles who have passed away from liver cirrhosis and liver failure and liver cancer. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about it and raising awareness. And you'll hear, I think at the end, you'll realize that it's the same story as COVID-19. There's a vaccine, get it to prevent you from getting hepatitis B. There's treatments available to help prevent from you progressing to a liver failure and liver cancer, so that, we can stay healthy. And looking at the CDC's data, so even though, Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders make up such a small portion of the United States population, and Asians as well. We make up more than 50% of the chronic hepatitis B cases here in the United States. So that's a huge discrepancy.
What's that percent again?
It's 50%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's just, yeah, there's a huge gap. And the reason being is, I think a lot of our, the endemic regions, or where hepatitis B is really common, is in Asia and in the South Pacific as well.
Yeah.
And so when people immigrate here, there's a large immigrate here to the United States, and don't really have the health insurance and maybe some cultural and language barriers, so they're not able to follow up with their doctors to check if they even have hepatitis, to get the treatment that they need, which kind of contributes to these high numbers. And the cancer mortality rate is 60% higher for Asians and Pacific Islanders than it is for whites. And so, I think there's a variety of different reasons why that's the case. But one of the things that I was interested in looking at specifically, and kind of just starting from square one, was...
Can I just interrupt for a little bit?
Yeah,
when you say the mortality rate is 60% higher, you mean like you're 60% more likely to die from it than the white population? Yeah. Okay.
And that was the liver cancer mortality from chronic hepatitis B specifically. So, yeah. So I think, you can probably come up with a variety of reasons of why that might be the case, but kind of already discussed some of them: cultural, language barriers, immigrating to a new country from an endemic region, and so forth. But one of the things that I wanted to look at was just, do my people even know about hepatitis? Like, what's their understanding? Are they even aware? And so I created a survey that basically asked questions about symptoms of hepatitis B, whether or not people knew there was a treatment available, whether or not people knew how it was transmitted, whether or not people knew it was common within our own community, and then also asked if they were positive for hepatitis B, or, had a family member who was positive for hepatitis B. And we conducted these surveys at the Pacific Islander Festival Association here in San Diego. So for those who don't know, there's an annual Pacific Islander Festival held here at, I think it's Ski Beach here in San Diego. Mm-hmm. And so people from all over Southern California and even from out of state, and some from even, back home in the islands, come to, just celebrate our community. So that's where we conducted the surveys. And I think, just the major findings that we found was overall knowledge for our communities was low regarding hepatitis B. And similar to other papers, what we saw is our communities kind of got hepatitis A and B mixed up. So there are different types of hepatitis. There's hepatitis A through E, actually. So A, B, C, D, E. Oh, wow. They're all different viruses, and they all affect the liver. But hepatitis B is really the one that can cause liver failure and liver cancer that doesn't have a cure. So hepatitis C, for example, more recently, they have a treatment now available that can cure hepatitis C. Wow. So, people kind of got those things mixed up. They were unaware that, it was common within their own communities, which is kind of alarming, considering the mortality and the prevalence is high amongst our people. And then one of the other interesting findings that we saw was comparing people who were born here in the United States to those who were born back in the islands. Knowledge scores were lower for people who were born back in the islands, and also reported vaccination rates were lower for people back in the islands, which once again is really concerning, because these are people coming from a really endemic area who are more likely to have chronic hepatitis B and who are not vaccinated. Mm-hmm. I think it was only in 1991 where it became universal for newborns to be vaccinated with hepatitis B, with the hepatitis B vaccine.
Okay, and so it's one of the ones that you receive when you're a baby.
Exactly, okay. But that was only really starting in like 1991. So I was born in 92. So everyone before that may or may not have received the vaccine, especially back home where resources may be a little bit more sparse. Right. And so I think that those were kind of the major findings. And I think it really just highlights the need, similar to what we're seeing with COVID-19, for, federal and state and local agencies to partner with our communities so that we can educate our people about hepatitis B, and also get them screened for hepatitis B and get them connected with health resources so they can receive the treatment that they need.
Wow.
You need to
another thing.
You need to triple up
Exactly,
your number,
yeah.
Alice, to your number of people to help you now. You need to triple up.
I know that there's really strong hepatitis B work happening within the Asian American organizations. Yep. And so I know, like, I did a little bit of Hep B stuff only because I worked for an Asian Pacific Islander organization that was doing Hep B stuff for the Asian population. Yeah. But what's really great is that, we have somebody like Kenny who, is from our community and understands the need for it, to be able to bring this information. And so I had written down, like, how do you find out whether you have it? If somebody is I will just say a chronic carrier, is that accurate?
Yeah.
If someone is a chronic carrier, they might not show symptoms, right? Mm-hmm. But how would they know whether they have it?
So the only way that you would know before it's too late, so like I was mentioning, at some point, because the virus is chronic, your liver will become cirrhotic and just become like hard and shrunken like a rock. It's not able to do what it's supposed to do, and so a lot of people die from bleeding. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of a lot of the times is all of a sudden. But the best way to prevent you from getting to that stage is to go to your doctor, mm-hmm. And ask them to get a hepatitis B test, and they can test you to see if you've been exposed, to see if you have been vaccinated, and to really find out where you're at exactly.
Mm-hmm. I know that in our community, the rate of people that actually have doctors is really low.
Yeah.
And so even doing something like that, we have a lot of folks that go to like clinics, community clinics. Is this something that is covered, say, if you have Medi-Cal? Do you know that kind of information, whether of screening? Okay.
I don't off the top of my head, but similar to like how we were doing COVID community vaccine events, after we started getting preliminary data from this study, we partnered with an Asian Pacific hepatitis B related organization and held community vaccination events for hepatitis B, or screening, I should say.
I see.
Where they did screening for hepatitis B, and there was a little bit of a turnout, but not as much. And I think the reason is, and you'll see this for a lot of chronic conditions that are kind of silent until they cause death, like hypertension, like diabetes, because it is a silent thing. A lot of people aren't in a rush to go and get it checked. Right. Compared to like COVID-19, it's in the news, you're hearing it, you have family members who are being affected by it. It's kind of in your face. Mm-hmm. You're more inclined to go get screened. You're more inclined to go and get vaccinated and do things about it.
Is the screening a blood test?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. It's a blood test.
Okay. I already wrote down community screening, couple it with like vaccine site or something.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Or testing.
Yeah, definitely. And the sad thing is that there is treatment available, and you're right. It comes down to having a health care provider and also having insurance.
Right.
And that's something that, we're still in the fight towards. But for people who are able, there's no reason why you can't go and get screened and begin that treatment if you have that that access.
And then how do you access the hepatitis B vaccine?
So that would also be through your doctor. Okay. So there, I think you get most of your vaccines when you're a child. You get flu vaccines, through your doctor sometimes, and some other vaccines when you're a little bit older, but you would also get that through your doctor once they screened you. So I would recommend getting screened first before getting vaccinated, just to see if you've, because for example, if you've been exposed to hepatitis B and just had an acute reaction and your body was able to get rid of it, then you're protected. You don't need a vaccine. And a lot of the time, people who are infected as adult, I think there's like a 5% chance that you convert to a chronic carrier, whereas for a baby, the chance of you converting to a chronic carrier is 90%. And so that's where we're seeing a lot of the chronic hepatitis B rates coming from, is going to be transmission from, mother to baby.
I see. And the vaccine, I think if I remember correctly, I might have had to take it when I was in college. I think it's like a three dose, and it's spaced out like 30 days and then 6 months or something like that.
Yeah. So it doesn't make it any easier.
I know. Like, I think I forgot to do my third one.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm not sure.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another barrier when you get to that stage.
Exactly, is because some people aren't aware, or may have forgotten that you need to complete the series to get full coverage. I mean, similar to some of the COVID-19 vaccines that are 2-dose. Right. 1 dose provides a limited efficacy. It's only with the 2nd dose that you get the full efficacy, the full protection, I should say. And so, similar with the hepatitis B vaccine, you need to be sure you get all of them.
Yeah, which reminds me of a story that I saw a friend share about the vaccination rates in Utah. It was, Utah, I was telling him, Utah was one of the first places to start having COVID vaccination sites in the community early. And so I guess there was a really huge participation for the first shot, but there was a huge drop off for the second shot, which I was really surprised to hear that. So anyway, just talking about how, that kind of drop off that doesn't help the community. So get your vaccine fully.
Yeah, you need get them all. It's important.
Yeah. Alicia, I have I don't know whether it's a comment, but the more you talk, Kenny, the more I feel like crying. Because of all the research. I haven't read the paper, but there's this research that done by what's that Fijian lady from the University of Michigan? Yeah, they did. I think you're involved in that, and it's the same thing. Overall knowledge is very low. That the Pacific Islanders is like a common thing, and we can see that there's a big gap between the community and you guys. You have all the informations, and I think it's Alice's job to actually connect us. But Alice don't have enough hands. And Alice's organization is about volunteerism, but I think our community doesn't only believe in volunteerism when we go give money to the Concetti and those kind of fundraising from Tonga. But it's kind of, we were talking with this about this with Alice and Mel in the program before. We talked about the same thing with Malo organization last week, and it's come down the same thing. And we don't know where to start because the knowledge is very low, and that's why we having all these issues, health issues, everything problems, because with that research that you guys did with Sela, it's just driving me, I don't know where, up the wall, something like that. how drugs, overweight, and all those things affect our community with a young age. So I don't know. I just want to make that comment, because what we do as a radio is the same. Trying to bring out all those information to the Tongans, and now we're going up to the Pacific Island, doing this radio for the Pacific Islanders. But when we do it in English, they don't come. They will come in and listen when we leave when we finish with the program. That's when they come and listen. I replay our program, Alice. I think I replayed our program with Mele 2-3 days ago, and that's when they come in and listen. And I was surprised when they said, yeah, I watched that last night or the night before, but that's what happened. But anyway, I just feel like, I don't know, Alice knows more about this than you too, Kenny. But I think we need to do something. Maybe we need to to do something with Alice, the media. Maybe 10 years ago there was no media. Now for the Pacific Islands,
now we have you.
And the Tongan, now we have the media. Today, there was this lady from Sacramento. She's with one of the it's Rachel. I don't know whether you know her, Alice. He emailed. No, it's a Rachel Bonage. It's from one of the organization called SoulScan. It's a public relation marketing, something like that.
Oh, okay.
But they have fund from the state to do vaccine awareness, and they called me, and she was really, she really needed urgently, and he goes, Emily, I thank you for calling me, because she emailed and I called her. Thank you for calling me. We've been looking around for Pacific Islanders media and Pacific Islanders organization, going, how it vaccine have an impact on you, blah, 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 blah. And I feel like giving him a budget of $10 million to see if that works. But that's what happened. They are looking, they're searching, they're looking for people to do this to do these awareness programs to our community. But when we do it, then we look at our community and goes, what are you guys talking about? I think we need to do it in a way, like in a choir, or, do a little role playing. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard.
It is. You've been there, Alice,
Yeah, I mean, we used to go to Lennox Church, and when they have I remember one time when Tonga went to the World Cup, I was working at the Tongan Center in LA. We actually hosted a screening. We paid for the subscription, and so many people showed up, and then we passed out information. So we just have to be really creative. Yeah. I think, mahalo po kay maheni, taukainga in hearing us talk about the information in a certain way. We just need to keep talking about it until it feels like it's part of the conversation. Because I think if we keep trying to change it or we give up, then our community will never get acclimated to hearing this information as part of conversation that's happening with all of us. So, Emily, I think that means that we're just going to need to get you a lot more money so that we continue to invade you.
And we need more people like the Pacific Island Association, Students Association. We need them to engage in the media outreach programs,
Yeah.
I can give them whatever hours they want to do. So they just keep talking. And also they have more creative ways on how to engage, maybe new creative ways.
Yes.
Maybe our ways is old. New creative way on how to talk, and they can, this lady sent me the script for the commercial for the vaccine. I look at it and I goes, this is the same thing that everybody is sending me the same thing. What I did, I changed it. It because I told the lady, you know what? I'm going to change a little bit. This advertisement will come from a little kid's voice, and goes, Mom, go make sure that I'll be vaccinated before the school start this year. So I can be more safer. So I told the lady, I'm going to change it like that. I'm going to get a kid to do the voiceover in Tongan for our Tongan community, and I'll get a Fijian kid to do a voiceover in Fijian. It's gonna be it's not gonna be easy to find the other, but I think but that's what I think, maybe that will reach the heart of the people.
Yeah.
Our people. Maybe
we're really lucky in this time that we have people like you. And I know I keep telling people, do you know how many Tongan radio stations there are that stream on Facebook? There are so many. So I think we need to do a Facebook tour with Kenny in all of the Tongan radio stations. I think, Emily, you have the list for all the radio stations, right?
Yeah.
We'll just tour him, and then people will hear
the Facebook radio station, we can call it. But so maybe, when we have the first program, the second, this is the third one. I always ask, can we get together sometimes and actually discuss what are we gonna go?
Yes.
What are we gonna? If not, then just let Leafar talk, or do all the talking. But
that's it. I think we're a minute over our time, but next week I'm bringing some young people that are actually part of our community health workers in different organizations that are on the ground doing COVID work. I'm pulling all of the Tongan ones to bring them next week. Emily will continue the conversation about like what do we need to do so we have more people that are helping out. Pretty soon Kenny's gonna have an MD after his name. He's gonna be able to hold a lot of authority.
That's right.
And we'll follow his lead. We just need to bring up another generation of people. But I want to give Kenny a chance to at least any last words. But I want to say thank you, Emily, for the opportunity.
Okay.
And then we'll continue the conversation next week. But I want Kenny to have the last word.
Thank you, Kenny.
Yeah, no, just thank you so much for bringing me on again. I always love talking about, things that relate to health in our communities. Not because of the numbers, I think that's something that is important because the government needs to know that it's happening, but we see it at home. And I think that's kind of the main reason why I like to do this thing is because, I see it happening in my family and I want to help them. And I know it's happening in a larger part in the community. So thank you for creating the space. And thank you, Alicia, for inviting me to be here to talk about this.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and Ofatu, see you next week.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Kenny. Nice meeting you. Then, thank you. Ofatu.
Bye.
Bye.
Lebu nanga